Hey everyone, Nathan Hudson here, founder of Perceptycs, where we are building the #1 growth agency for subscription apps, in my biased opinion. Now, in this video, I'm going to be walking you through my go-to tools and tech stack for building and launching Web2App funnels. These will be the tools that I have used personally, and we use as a team at Perceptycs with our clients. Now, in the last video, we broke down the pros and cons of web app funnels for subscription apps, depending on what stage the app is at. And the reason I did this is because the landscape changes at different scales. If you haven't seen that one, the link will be in the description. Now, similarly, in this video, when it comes to the different tool sets and toolkits that you'll want to use, they're going to change over time. So I'm going to break these down into 3 sets of tools that I recommend you use at different circumstances, and I'm going to tell you when you shouldn't use each of them, in my opinion. Now, one thing to note is I'm going to be focusing on tools to build out web-to-app onboarding funnels, right? So web funnels that have a landing page, onboarding funnel, quiz or survey, and a checkout page. If you're new to the channel and find this video useful, please subscribe, as it will help me out and will help the channel grow, and it's all I ask for this free content. So let's dive in. The first toolset is cheap and cheerful, and this is the toolset I recommend to any mobile app that has serious budget constraints, right? By that I mean you're probably doing around 10 to 20k MRR. You just have enough budget to start out with paid acquisition, cash flow's a big issue, and you don't have that much additional resource to be spending on tooling and other resources. But you know you should be testing web funnels because you watched my last video. So what is this toolset? This toolset really consists of 4 things. It has 2 main elements, but overall it's 4 things that you really need to get up and running. Number 1 is a visual website builder. Number 2 is a quiz form or quiz builder. Number 3 is a payment processor. And number 4 is a subscription management tool or a mobile revenue analytics platform. Now let's go through what I mean by each of these. The visual website builder is basically a tool to create a website in a drag and drop manner, right? So something like Webflow or WordPress. These are my go-to tools. Now, Webflow isn't technically a drag and drop builder, but you don't need to be the most experienced web developer to use it, and it is my personal preference. But my second preference is WordPress. If you don't have that much experience building out websites, or you don't have a web developer on your team, then absolutely you're going to want to go with WordPress, because you'll probably have an easier job at doing certain things as a beginner. But there are other tools as well. Wix, Squarespace. I haven't really used these, but they can work. Now, what is this for? This is for building out the landing page and paywall page. Not the checkout page specifically, because the payment processor has a lot to do with that, but the paywall page, right? Your product description page, if you will. You can get these pages up and running really, really quickly, right? You can make variants of them for A/B testing or sequential testing. You can technically also build the quiz this way too. So you can build the entire onboarding funnel with your website builder, especially with the right plugins. However, primarily, this is what you need to build the landing page and paywall page. The quiz builder is what I'd suggest you use for actually building out the onboarding survey. This is going to be something like Typeform or Jotform or ScoreApp. All of these tools I'm suggesting work. Some people find it easier to use some over the others. They have different price points. You can look into each of them and pick what you like. Personally, I have the most experience using Typeform for this, but we are working with some clients who are really, really fond of ScoreApp, and it is a great tool. Arguably, it has a little bit more flexibility with some things, but as I say, either of these tools will set you up nicely for your initial testing. You could just use the website builder for this, but it means you either need to be more comfortable with the platform. So if you're super comfortable with Webflow, then no problem, you can build out forms in Webflow. Or if you're using WordPress, you might be reliant on different plugins. These can just be fiddly and require more maintenance, so I personally prefer just using the dedicated quiz builder and integrating this with your website builder. Easy as that. Now, the payment processor is absolutely required if you want to take payment on the web. If you don't want to take payment on the web and you just want to direct people to the app, well, there you go. You can just use the first 2. But assuming you do, because there are lots of pros, as per the last video, hint, hint, you're probably going to be wanting taking payments on the web. So Stripe and Paddle are the most common payment processors for web funnels specifically. That doesn't mean that these are the only ones, nor does it mean they're the only ones that work, but for companies that are targeting a US market or a European market, really Stripe and Paddle are good options. I'm telling you specifically the tools that I have experience with or a really strong good working knowledge of. I'm not going to tell you some tool that I heard some guy talk about one time because it worked for him if I don't know anything about it. Now, the main difference between Stripe and Paddle is that Paddle acts as the merchant of record. So they collect sales tax, handle refunds, take care of chargebacks for a small fee, right? Whereas Stripe, on the other hand, is just a payment processor. The tax part here is super, super helpful, especially if you remember some of the challenges that we discussed when we were looking at the cons of Web2App funnels. Tax was a big one. Paddle makes this a lot easier. It's also easier to use straight out the box, whereas Stripe needs a little bit more development work to really get going with. However, there are benefits to Stripe too. In my opinion, it's more customizable, more flexible. It also has, integrations with RevenueCat and Adaptee, which we're going to come to in a second, that Paddle doesn't right now at the time of recording, but this is something that's coming. Stripe is also a lower cost product, so if you want to really save on fees, there's that. But the reason it's the case is because they're not doing the other points that I mentioned. So there are pros and cons for both of those. Personally, because the integration with revenue analytics platforms, I would go with Stripe, and I recommend Stripe most often to our clients just because it's easy. But there are some strong benefits of Paddle too, and this could change in the next 1, 2, 3 months. Finally, you need a subscription management tool, right? A mobile revenue analytics platform. This is so you can actually manage the user subscription state and premium access on mobile, as well as understand the conversion and renewal rates. In 99% of cases, you'll already have one of these. You're probably using either RevenueCat or Adaptee, as I mentioned. I've used both of these tools. I like both of these tools. I know the teams behind both of these tools. They're great tools. What I would say is if you've got one already set up, go with that. If you haven't got one set up, do your own research here to weigh out what makes sense for you. The pricing for these is pretty similar. It's actually identical at a certain point. So let's critique this tool set, right? What are the pros and cons? When should we use this? Well, the number one pro is that it's cheap, right? Hence cheap and cheerful. There's not a lot of overhead. Chances are you might already be using a website builder for your actual marketing site, so there's no additional cost there. The survey tools are not expensive at all. For some of the biggest packages, you can get, under $100, under $60 for like middle packages that have a good number of form responses. So really it's not that much of an uplift. That is a monthly cost. The payment processor tools are pay as you go, right? So it's not an overhead at all here. And RevenueCat and Adaptee both take 1% of tracked revenue at this stage. So until you're actually making money, it's not that much of an issue. So you're not going to get something cheaper than this, right? I'll put it out there now. This is the cheap and cheerful MVP builder. I don't have money, but I want to get started. What should I use? This is it, right? Like if you're watching this and you've got like hardly any money, this is it, right? There's nothing cheaper. Not that I know. Now it's also easy to maintain and to run fast experiments. You will need your app developer support with the revenue platform integrations, and you may need dedicated web dev support initially to get up and running, especially if you don't have any experience with WordPress or Webflow or Wix or Squarespace. And you're going to need help integrating the payment processor to get everything working initially. But once it's actually up and running, it's super easy to maintain. And to be honest, you could probably do this stuff yourself if you just watch some videos. There's loads of tutorials out there on how to do this, so you can actually do a lot of it yourself. Beyond that, when it comes to running the experiments, easy. Your growth team, your marketing team, they can own it. Marketers have been owning A/B tests for marketing sites with these tools for years. So you don't need a developer to make every change. You can do things yourself. There is a benefit, especially when you want to be fast. Now, the other benefit is for non-quiz customization. I said I was only going to focus on web onboarding surveys and quizzes, but there is one big benefit I want to mention, is that with this setup, you can pretty easily reroute traffic to other tools and platforms for other types of web funnels, right? You can embed videos into your site, you can embed custom JavaScript, right? You can use webinar platforms and other tools and get pretty fancy as you grow. So you're not too limited here, which is great. What about the downside, right? Why would you not want to use this toolset? Now, the biggest downside, in my opinion, is that what you're left with is a website and a Typeform integration. And it's what it is. I've seen some great ones with some really big brands or big enough apps, right? Doing, 500,000 MRR. But it's obvious that it's a website built in Webflow and Typeform. You can just see. It doesn't feel that premium or that native. Now, don't get me wrong. The websites you can build in Webflow are super premium. They're super great and they're somewhat native and they can have animations and be all cool. It's beautiful. But the journey itself as an experience and as kind of one UX journey, it is cheap, right? It's cheap, cheerful, and scrappy. It's not the most premium. And the key is that it's not the most native. Ideally, you want your web to app funnels to feel smooth and feel as though the user is actually in your app and not on your website. If you look at apps like Blinkist, Headway, Duolingo, Calm, Noom, they have branded web to app journeys. They look and feel super native, especially on mobile. And that's the key. The majority of your traffic is going to be on mobile, so my top tip here is optimize the experience for mobile. As I said, you can embed custom JavaScript, which is true, but in my experience, these funnels always end up just feeling like websites as opposed to app experiences. So you're pretty much limited by your skills and web development talent, which isn't ideal. And if you want to get fancier, you need more web dev support, at which point you begin to question the cost of this cheap and cheerful toolset. And the final con, as I mentioned above, it does require resource to get started. You will need developer support to an extent. It's also fiddly. You're going to use 4 different tools and integrate these and stitch them together. We haven't even touched on the fact that you're going to need to consider Google Analytics or Mixpanel integration to really begin to optimize the funnel and figure out what users are doing as they go through. In my opinion, you don't need this in the early days if you're running big swing experiments. You can just get away with pixel tracking, conversion API tracking with your Meta, for example, or TikTok or whatever you're using and figure out what's working best. But as you begin to optimize, you're going to need these integrations too. We worked with one team a while back and it took them 8 weeks to set this up and running, right? 8 weeks, that's a huge amount of time. Now, being honest, you can do it way faster than that. There's no reason it can't be done in a few days max if you dedicate the focused time to it. So it really depends on your team and who's doing it and what you're comparing it to. If you're comparing it to building out Toolset 3, this is going to be way faster, right? Don't want to give too much away. But if you're comparing it to Toolset 2, well, not that fast. So what's the verdict here? As I said in the beginning, it's the perfect choice for resource-constrained apps who just want some indication of whether or not web-to-app funnels are something they should explore further. Is this something they should invest in? You can build out your MVP this way, you can get your first test live, you can absolutely get results with it and have a profitable funnel. You don't need to use this for an MVP and then switch straight away. As I said, there are apps making $500K a month still running this funnel, so it's by no means limited to absolute beginners, but I think that's where it shines the most. So if you have a strong web developer on your team, you can push harder and longer with this. If not, you're going to probably want to switch to another funnel at some point when your marketing team kind of gets bottlenecked and blocked by their own capability. So, Toolset 2. What other options are there? Now, there are companies out there who have built and are building specific tools for web-to-app testing. These are web-to-app funnel builders. The main tool I have experience with is FunnelFox. There are other tools. Another tool I'm familiar with is onboarding.online. I've not used it myself, and I would say it's more in its infancy, but it looks like it has a lot of great features and is definitely one to keep an eye on. But FunnelFox is the tool I've personally used with clients. I know the team well, and yeah, what can I say? It's a good tool. Essentially, FunnelFox is a drag and drop web funnel builder. You can build the landing page, welcome screen, onboarding surveys, and checkout directly in FunnelFox. You can integrate with your payment processor and revenue analytics platform, whether that's RevenueCat or Adaptee, and you can also use feature flags and integrate with Mixpanel to analyze your experiments. Pretty easy. Now, the team behind FunnelFox is the same team behind Adaptee, so they know their stuff when it comes to mobile growth and conversion rate optimization, paywall optimization, funnels for mobile subscription apps. But FunnelFox does integrate with both Adaptee and RevenueCat, so there aren't limitations there. So what do I think about this tool? Now, this is me being completely honest, right? I'm not getting paid to say this. It's a great tool. It speeds up the process dramatically. It's a lot less fiddly. You can get dev work done in under 1 day and just let your growth team do the rest. So it's absolutely faster than Toolset 1. In fact, it's the fastest toolset around at the moment. I don't think there's a way to do it that's faster than this. And the biggest benefit, if you're coming from Toolset 1, is that it feels way more native, right? It tackles that issue of, I'm just kind of on a website with Typeform. These onboarding journeys feel like in-app onboarding journeys. You can add animations, like some of those progress charts that we see going around. You can personalize the quiz questions based on previous answers they've given and different sections based on previous inputs they've given you. So it's a solid option, faster than option 1 and way more native than that kind of MVP toolset. Is it as customizable? Well, you can embed custom JavaScript into FunnelFox to keep things flexible, so you can use an iframe and embed kind of whatever you want, right? Now, I know some developers may argue that whenever you go from a custom development to some sort of drag and drop builder, you lose flexibility. Sure, I'm not going to argue with that, but I think for 99.9% of web to app use cases where people are looking for an onboarding quiz specifically, even some of the more exciting quizzes, this just won't be an issue, right? Not for a very long time. If you've got a very complex product and you do some really fancy stuff, maybe it'll be more of an issue sooner. But chances are, if that is the case, you're going to have a larger development team, and this may not be an issue for you building-wise, so you might not need this tool set. So overall, it's looking very, very promising, right? What are the drawbacks, right? Why would you not use this? Well, I guess the question is, let's talk about cost. This is arguably the one drawback of the toolset. Now, I don't think by any means that the tool is overpriced. Of course, the tool is fairly new and rapidly growing, so I would expect the price to increase over time, right? Especially when you consider all the benefits and kind of the demand for web to app. But the starting cost for apps is around $3,000 a month for up to 50K in tracked revenue. Now, that's not bad. Right? When you compare it to other tools like Adaptee, for example, it is a significantly higher price. If you compare it to, revenue analytics platforms or quiz funnels or the other tool set, it is a significantly higher price. There's no doubt about it. But all in all, when you consider the fact that you're going to save on the Apple fees when you move to web to app, which I think is kind of what they're leaning on, it's not that bad. And what I will say is that beyond that 50K in tracked revenue, they then have custom prices based on tracked revenue quotas to keep things competitive. And beyond that, it switches to like a 1.5% of tracked revenue, I believe, at the moment. I say it may change. So the way to think about it is at scale, you'll be paying 1.5% of revenue. So relative to your revenue, it starts out a lot worse in the beginning when you're just getting started and you've got to pay 3K a month. But if you're scaling quite rapidly, or you already have a funnel and you're looking for a faster way to test, aka moving from toolset 1 to toolset 2, then it's not that much of an issue. And if you're going to scale this a lot, as I said, you're going to save on the fees. Even when you add in the Stripe fees, which are around 3%, 4.5% is still a lot less than 15%, and it's a heck of a lot lower than 30%. So there's that. Anyhow, I don't think that comparing the fees of FunnelFox to Apple or Stripe makes sense. Really, I think we have to ask ourselves, is the cost of FunnelFox less than the development cost if we were to build this ourselves, whether that be Toolset 1 or Toolset 3, which we're going to come to. Now, Toolset 1 is cheap and cheerful, so no, it's not going to be cheaper. Even if you paid a developer and went with Toolset 1, you'd be paying less than you would with FunnelFox because you wouldn't need that developer full time. So Toolset 1 is cheaper. But if you're going to go with Toolset 3, yeah, it's going to be a lot more expensive to do that, right? So this is going to be no-brainer. So it is a cost-effective solution, in my opinion, in most cases, unless you're really budget constrained or you're trying to prove out web to app funnels. I would suggest that you go with this. But I caveat this with one thing: scale, right? If you're making 500K a month on web, you'd pay them, 7,500 USD at this point in time, which, arguably at that point you're like, should we just hire a developer to build this, right? Maybe we should. If you're at $1 million a month and you're paying them 15,000 USD a month, you definitely could build out an in-house team to own this and be more flexible. So arguably it may get to the point where it's cheaper for you to completely own this yourself. What I would say though, is that in practice, It's a lot easier and smoother to just use the tool than it is to actually build this out, because your growth team can just use the tool. As soon as you bring in your own development, you kind of need a product manager as well. You're going to need to make tickets and have back and forth and prioritization issues. They become a lot more moving parts, a lot of stakeholders to manage. So in my opinion, yeah, it's a questionable one up to a certain point. I would kind of summarize this by saying the following. Unless you're making millions or more a month through web-to-app funnels, or you have a developer working with iframes and JavaScript so much that they might as well just do the rest, you're probably better off sticking with FunnelFox. That's my opinion. So let's wrap up this toolset. Assuming you start with toolset 1, you've proved out your MVP, you've got a web funnel going, you're like, yep, this works, I want to do more. Let's say you're making 20 to 30K MRR on web. You have two choices. Either keep juicing that toolset. If it works for you and you have a process and you have a backlog of experiments to run, keep juicing it, right? You don't need to switch to a tool if you can just keep doing it and keep it cheap and run experiments quickly. But if your process is getting a bit long-winded and just take a little bit too long for you to do, or you want a more native feel and you're kind of running out of experiments that you can do yourself, that's when you would switch to FunnelFox. And if you're already a scaling app looking to launch web-to-app for the first time, e.g. you're doing 100K plus in MRR, I would say don't reinvent the wheel, just speak to FunnelFox and get started. And hey, tell them I sent you, right? But yeah, so you'll be able to test way faster that way, and it gives you a high chance of making it profitable, in my opinion. So let's talk about the final toolset. I'm talking VS Code, a team of developers, product managers, and React Native, or whatever programming languages and development frameworks you pick. Essentially, I mean building custom web app funnels from scratch. When would I suggest this? There are a few instances where I would really suggest that you do this. If total customization of the experience is what you need, build it yourself. For some games or complex apps who want to do smart things with the users on the web, or kind of give users a demo or freemium experience through the funnel, right? So I'm talking less about quizzes and more about just leveraging core product functionality. If you want to do that in a more reliable, efficient, and smoother way than iframes and JavaScript, or you've tried JavaScript and you're facing performance issues, be it generally or with users on certain devices, and you know that that's a problem for your audience, then yeah, you're probably going to want to build it yourself. But chances are, if that's you, you'd know anyway and wouldn't be looking for other tool sets in the first place. The second instance that I'd recommend this is if you're an enterprise company or a unicorn and you're basically making so much money that paying a percentage of revenue, no matter how small it is, just irks you so much because it's a variable cost and it just angers you and you are just not going to do it, or you would just never get that signed off. Yeah, if that's you, then probably you're going to have to build it yourself. The other instance is for teams that already have a lot of development resource just waiting around, right? Like you've got a lot of developers, they're not really that busy anymore. Oh, should you buy a tool or should you just build it yourself? Well, probably you should just point them at this and have them own it, right? Other than these three specific situations, I wouldn't suggest you do this. I have worked with a couple of teams in this way, and honestly, it was a pain, right? A huge headache, to the point where a couple of them actually built out Toolset 1 on the side for faster testing, and now are actually looking into FunnelFox. The reason for this is because unless the resource that you have on the development side is dedicated to the funnel, prioritization disputes and politics always get in the way. Like, it's very rare that it's going to be as smooth as you think it's going to be. The growth team wants to run this experiment, but an epic's been planned out and everyone's busy for the next 2 to 8 weeks minimum. So it is what it is. Look, if you go this route, have more development resource dedicated to the web funnel, right? That way you can actually work on it and scale it quickly. Or at least have it as the number one priority where they drop everything else as soon as work comes up that means they need to focus on the web funnel. Hence why for larger apps, this can work really well because they can afford it and it becomes more cost effective because, as I've said before and I'll say again, fees scale, people costs don't scale as much. Yes, you'll need more designers and more developers, but then you won't. And if you're scaling really, really quickly, those fees are just going to rise and rise and rise each month, and it's probably not the best option for you. So to conclude, all the tool sets work. All of them are viable options. The one you should pick depends on what you need your web funnel to do, how much resource you have available, both budget and development resource, and how much revenue you'll be generating through the funnel. At the lower end, indie developer, bootstrap app who's just launched Page UA, go with Toolset 1. Website builder, quiz builder, stick with it till you scale, and when you feel you need a more native experience or to experiment faster, decide what to do from there. For most people watching this, 30k MRR to 2 million MRR, maybe even more, FunnelFox is going to be the way to go. You're going to be able to get things done a lot faster. You don't need to worry about additional processes and complexities, and you can just have your growth team run it as soon as it's integrated. Now, at the very, very upper end of the spectrum, those enterprise unicorn apps who begrudge paying 1.5% of revenue, or apps that require complex web funnels that leverage specific product features, build a custom web app. So that's my take on it. That's my opinion on different tool sets. I hope this video has been helpful. Again, please like and subscribe so that the channel grows. Leave any questions or thoughts you might have in the comments and we can discuss. And I'll see you next time.